Okay, that's the beep sound. And this class is being recorded now. To begin with our class, let's start by checking the attendance. So good morning, Monday, everyone. I hope everyone had a great weekend, able to refresh ourselves during the weekend. And now we are ready to begin actually with our lesson. So last week we learned about the procedures. We have learned about the classroom rules, some guidelines. We also learned to know more about each other. And just a quick review, does anyone remember what SOP means? By the way, if my volume is too loud, you can adjust your volume there at your side so that it will be more comfortable with you. It might be too slow or too loud. Please adjust your speaker's volume. So just a quick review. Anyone who remembered what SOP means? No one. No answer. Raise your hand if you remembered. Yes, Jeans.
Song of Prophets, yeah.
Is that SOP?
Yes, yeah, Songs of Prophets, yeah.
Yeah, that's also SOP, but that's not what
ผิดวิชา
I
มึงผิดวิชา
for computer class.
Oh, wrong.
Yes, PK, what's that?
I just said wrong subject. Yeah.
Wrong subject. That was Bible. So we are now in computer class. Please focus, Jeans. So in computer class, SOP stands for what? I have mentioned a while ago about procedures. So remember, we have SOPs, and I hope you have remembered that from last week. Now it's time to begin by checking the attendance. Let me call. Please prepare your microphones. Turn on your microphones and please say present if your name is called. Pepper.
Huh?
Okay, Beckham.
Huh?
Yep, let's say present. And when you hear your name, please say present for the attendance. Jean.
Yes.
Pan.
Yes.
Figo.
Present.
Cream.
Present.
By Mint.
Present.
Alvin.
Yes.
Proud not here. PK.
Yeah.
Mix Max.
Absent.
Sojin.
Here.
Lin.
Yes.
Shania.
Yes.
By Fair.
Yes.
Jeans.
Yes.
My egg.
Yes.
Everybody present. That's good. So now let's begin with our lesson. As I have mentioned last week, we are going to start with JavaScript about web designing. And yeah, I also hope that everyone remembered we have procedures, our online classroom procedures, as well as guidelines, or we call it SOP for computer class. Now, let me share with you our presentation for today since we start our JavaScript. So let's go to Introduction to JavaScript. Just the slide. Let me share the slide. Hold on. Let me prepare my PowerPoint. Okay. Wait, hold on. So welcome to JavaScript Programming Language course for beginners. And we are now about to begin with JavaScript. So here you will see introduction to JavaScript, and we have the source reference. It's actually from Home and Learn JavaScript, and the reference as well from w3schools.com JS default. So I will share with you the link later on through.
Teacher, may I go to toilet, please?
Okay,
Thank you.
be back right away. You can just catch up with the view with the link that I'm going to share with you. So these are the links or the resources for our lesson. Let's take a closer look about the lesson. So this one. Let me end first this one. And this is actually the resource that we are going to use. Web design course, JavaScript. Okay, this one. So this will be our online resource. So this is like the physical textbook, but since we're online, so we're doing it online textbook. This will be your online textbook based from this web page, JavaScript Home and Learn. And there are actually sections that we need to cover. Hold on. Okay, this one. So in JavaScript, there are sections divided into sections. So this will serve as our online textbook. In section 1, we will get started. That's what we'll cover today. We have a browser, what browser we're going to use. For JavaScript, we have JavaScript programming basics. Okay, we will cover that one in section 3.
Did you send the PDF?
The link, this is a web page. I did not send the link. You want, okay, I will share with you the link to Google Stream. Hold on, sorry for that. Let me share through Google Stream. G10. So I'll just write here online textbook or online resource. JavaScript online resource link. So there, G10. Okay, you can go to Google Stream. I have shared with you the link. And we are going to cover that. This will be a resource for the online class. G9, hold on. Okay, so I have shared with you now. Please go there. You can also follow along. And in section 4, we have the JavaScript string manipulation. We have dates and times, HTML forms, JavaScript and HTML elements, JavaScript and images, JavaScript and location, JavaScript and HTML canvas, and we have the JavaScript libraries. So we're going to cover that for the first semester of this school year. Let me change the PowerPoint. Stop presenting. So going back to our PowerPoint, so we have the introduction to JavaScript, the source, and the reference as well. We have in this next slide, we will quickly review the ESLRs. So the school ESLRs are right thought, right communication, right attitude, right conduct, and right lifestyle. So as what we have discussed last week, these are some of the unwritten rules for online computer class. We can also apply this once we get back to school. So for today's lesson objective, we are going to introduce the JavaScript course. And we have this question, what is JavaScript? Does anyone research about what JavaScript is? Or if you have gone through the web page, JavaScript actually means it's a scripting language. Okay, what kind of language? We have a lot of languages. So for computer, there's a language as well. Okay, they call it scripting language. And this language is an interpreted language as well in JavaScript. It's also called an object-oriented programming language. So you will know later on why it's called object-oriented. And it's also embedded directly into HTML pages. So when you were in grade 9, we have learned how to create HTML page. So those pages that we had in grade 9, there were no JavaScript included in it. It was basically more on presenting and more on designing web page. So that was HTML. So in JavaScript, we can now add some interpreted language, some object-oriented language, and it is directly embedded or mixed into HTML pages. And please remember that JavaScript is not Java. Okay, there are two different languages, so don't confuse JavaScript with Java. So with JavaScript, you can actually gain more control of your web page. So how do you control your web page? Example, we have created, if you remembered last year, we created your classroom blog, your personal blog. We created the study tips guide. We also created like some, if you remember, does anyone remember what we did during the HTML? I think HSAW was there also. So those web pages that we designed, we can actually control more of those web pages with JavaScript. So document elements can be inspected. You can inspect with JavaScript. In form elements are validated before the contents are sent. Browser details checked with JavaScript. We can also set cookies. We can set dates and times. You can add it there, and we can have simple games as well with JavaScript. Those who love games, yeah, this programming is for you. You can add games in you can create games. Instead of playing, you can just actually create your own game. Okay, these are some of the browsers that have been tested with JavaScript. Some of these browsers are quite old, but they have been updated from time to time. We have Firefox, we have Safari, Google Chrome as well. There's a lot more browsers that are tested with JavaScript, and maybe there could be some slight different features. However, JavaScript mostly are supported with the recent and modern browsers as well. Okay, so let's talk more about JavaScript. And these are some JavaScript tips and guidelines. Okay, please take note of this. So the first one, JavaScript is case sensitive. So just like if you remember in HTML, usually the file names was recommended to have lowercase letters. So the same with JavaScript. JavaScript is case sensitive. So we have to ensure that capitalization is correct for variables and function names. So remember, now we are going to create variables and functions in JavaScript. So my index, the one with the capital, actually is not the same as my index with lowercase. So please take note of that. So since JavaScript is case sensitive, that means the one with the capital is different with the one with the lowercase. That's what it means by being case sensitive. So we have to be very careful with our capital letters, capitalization, or lowercase letters in JavaScript. The second one is about the semicolons. So semicolons, JavaScript interprets automatically and adds semicolons to the end of most lines. So this is one good thing with JavaScript. If you forget it, it will automatically add. But however, it is better to write them manually to avoid strange side effects. So there might be some side effects, or the interpreter might misinterpret it. So it's better not to forget your semicolons in JavaScript. The third one, we have the white space and new lines. So most white spaces, tabs, and empty lines is ignored by JavaScript interpreter. So even if you press enter 2 times and you have added a code there, still JavaScript will remove that white space, ignore that white space, and it will continue to execute what has been coded in your JavaScript. So here's an example. These lines are equivalent with example x equals string, and see the space there, x space equals space string. These are just equivalent. They are just the same. Okay, so that's what it means by white space and new line. So even if you put space there, the same effect or the same result will also be taken. We will see the same result with x equals no space string. X space equals space string has the same result in JavaScript. So this means the lines are being ignored in JavaScript. So that's what you need to remember in JavaScript. The fourth one, breaking a line of code. So there will be long lines of code that can be broken with a backslash character. So remember that you add backslash, you can actually, it's a shortcut for some long lines within a text string. So here's an example. Document that write hello. So we have that backslash from JavaScript. Okay, so you have whatever words you can add in there, long lines of code. Just backslash it, and you'll be able to shorten your code with the backslash. You can actually break a line of code using the backslash. That's one thing that you need to remember in JavaScript. The fifth one, we have the reserved words. So what are these reserved words? If it's reserved, that means these words are exclusive for JavaScript. So do not use this as your variables or your let or your const for JavaScript, because these are actually reserved or exclusive for JavaScript. So what are these examples? We have break is an example of JavaScript code. So do not use that as your variable or your constant or your let, for example. We have the continue. There's a lot actually more. Let's take a look to all of them. Okay, all of these are reserved words in JavaScript. You might see, wow, there's a lot, but there's actually a lot more. These are just a few examples. We have break, we have continue, do, for, in, if, new, return, throw, var, with, case, this. We have default is also part of reserved word in JavaScript. We have else, we have function, we have instance of, switch, type of, try, void, catch, delete, finally while. So these are all examples of reserved words in JavaScript. So do not use this in your variables later on. Next, JavaScript tips and guidelines. Yeah, so there were actually 5 we have discussed. So the first one is case sensitive. So remember that capital letter and small lowercase are different in JavaScript. We have the semicolons, although JavaScript will automatically add semicolons, but still it is recommended to add semicolons as it might cause some misinterpretation later on with JavaScript. The white space and new lines as well, they are ignored with JavaScript. Breaking a line of code, you can use the backslash. So if you want to shorten lines of code, use the backslash to shorten it. And we have the reserved words in JavaScript. We have examples, instance of, we have default. Those are examples of reserved words. So do not use reserved words in JavaScript in your variables. Now let's go to the JavaScript statistics. Okay, we are here. Just a short, quick history of JavaScript. So basically, JavaScript was originally created by, if you know Brandon H. of Netscape in 1995. So it actually took how many years now? Almost more than 2 decades, JavaScript has been existing. So JavaScript's formal name is ECMA script. So if you say ECMA script, that's actually the same. That's the name before they call it JavaScript before. So let me, this one. So before they call it ECMA script. So ECMA, actually JavaScript is governed by the European Computer Manufacturers Association. That's why it's ECMA, which is published the 5th edition in the language in December 2009. So they have published 5th edition in December 2009. So the latest stable version as of 2011, so that was 10 years ago, is 1.8.5. So now they have actually developed ES6 as, I think, the latest for JavaScript, ES6 now. And there are some standards with this JavaScript. However, the basics are still there. We can still go back with the basics and we're still good with it. So these are just a few of the history of JavaScript, a quick history of JavaScript. And I hope you can also remember this as we go on with our lessons. Now it's time for our web quest. So for our web quest, please use your internet and read about what is JavaScript. So I'll give you a few minutes. What time is it now? 25, and we're ending 10:30. Yeah, so you have about 5 minutes. Just quickly browse what JavaScript is and get some additional notes. Maybe I have not covered all of it, so you can take a quick look of what JavaScript in your device.
Teacher, may I leave now?
So if you have read about JavaScript, so it's also almost time. So you can log out and you can have an early rest before you go to your next class. Bye bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye bye.